Some call me Steve, Dad, husband, or friend. Others might call me boss, coach, or mentor. Today, you can call me the Leadership Hacker. Thanks for listening in. I really appreciate it. My job as the Leadership Hacker is to hack into the minds, experiences, habits, and learning of great leaders, C-suite executives, authors, and development experts so that I can assist you developing your understanding and awareness of leadership. I'm Steve Rush, and I'm your host today. I'm the author of Leadership Cake. I'm a transformation consultant and leadership coach, and can't wait to start sharing all things leadership with you. Our special guest on today's show is Punit Dhillon. He's Chairman and CEO of Sky Bioscience and also author of Catapult. But before we get a chance to speak with Punit, it's the Leadership Hacker News. It's easy to get caught up in the great resignation craze of quitting. It's human nature that makes us see where millions of people are doing something, we follow along with that herd mentality that is millions of years old. And it's quite understandable after almost 2 years of enduring a pandemic and seeing loved ones get sick and pass away. It changes our outlook on life. And that realisation that life is actually quite short. We're all going to go through a collective thinking of what we should do with the rest of our lives. Finding a new job with purpose, meaning and more money is alluring, especially when you're stuck in a going nowhere role with a boss who micromanages your every move. Here's the leadership hack. Before you follow the crowd and make the big leap of going after a new shiny job, take the time to think deeply about why you're doing this in the first place. There's an overwhelming narrative when it comes to searching for a new job, and it's deep within you. The default is it's usually your boss, and often is, by the way. And you often will be giving yourself some internal dialogue that sounds like it's their fault. You've got to move on, you've got to get away. Sometimes this is the case, but actually, it could be you. It's really convenient to blame everyone else. But there may be other issues involved as well. So consider this. If you're just running away from a problem, when you secure a new role, will the problem repeat itself? Will you be happy? Will you still feel dissatisfied? Most of us are too self-critical. We dwell with our shortcomings are. Our inner coach gives us negative thoughts that play around in our heads. And while we're all grown-up adults, we still carry around the burden of past trauma, failures, insecurities, and, if we're fortunate enough, learnings. There is the desperate hope that by quitting we'll magically become a new and different person, and with a new job everything will fall neatly into place. The new environment will be our cure and make us happy. So while it may be an answer, it may not be. Switching jobs may not make the difference at all. You might end up just as miserable and thinking and behaving the same way. It's similar to when you travel or you move. That initial feeling of euphoria of being in a new world or a new house can be really alluring and great. As time goes by, it becomes normal. And why? Well, you're the same person. As time goes by, you realise the same person with the same challenges is now just in a different location. So my hack to you is think before you make that great resignation greater. Because your opportunity could be just under your nose if you looked hard enough for it. We love sharing stories that you bring to our attention, so please keep doing so. That's been the Leadership Hacker News. Let's get into the show. Joining me today is Punit Dhillon. He's the Chairman and CEO of Sky Bioscience. He's an entrepreneur, keen athlete, and author of the book Catapult, How to Think Like a Corporate Athlete to Strengthen Your Resilience. Punit, welcome to the Leadership Hacker Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Steve. Pleasure.
Looking forward to getting into your story. I was particularly inspired about the stories that you shared when we first met. So perhaps for those that have not been familiar with your work or your company, just give us a little bit of your backstory.
Yeah, so I basically have been an athlete growing up, but then as of the last 20 years, been focused on the life science space. So happy and very lucky to be regarded as an entrepreneur in that area, and in terms of what the different work that we've done. I've been developing a couple different technologies in my last 20 years. My most recent company that I was involved with was working on a cancer immunotherapy drug. And presently, we're working on a novel class of molecules for an ophthalmology application or various ophthalmology applications. So I think by working in the life science industry, it's been very rewarding, and I've had a wonderful set of teams that I've been a part of, and lucky to be continuing to work with some of them over the last 2 decades. So it's been quite a pleasure.
Yeah. So if we peel that back a little bit, there are a couple of things in your early life that set you on your journey, if you like, into becoming an athlete, and indeed how that then transferred into your ways of working at business. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's been the discipline of growing up as an athlete really has stuck with me, and it carried into my professional career, and that's what that's what I kind of have written about. But I started as a competitive swimmer, and then moved into rowing university, and then after that, I had basically an opportunity to move to the U.S., where I started in life science industry. Actually, didn't do as much anything competitive at that point. I was still working out regularly, but then I became pretty comfortable as a runner and started participating in different like half marathons and marathons, and in my early 30s, or like as I was turning 30, I kind of had a bucket list thing that I wanted to accomplish, and it was doing an Ironman, and I basically got hooked on triathlon. So I've been competing in triathlons over the last 10 years, on and off, and I still enjoy endurance sports. So essentially, that has been a very interesting parallel for me that relates really well to the professional work. I guess we were talking about this earlier, leaning into what it takes to complete an Ironman, or any triathlon for that matter, or even just endurance training itself. There has a real connection in terms of the component of drive. There is mental aptitude involved. I think it's really helped me in terms of being able to process a lot, and it's really shaped my approach to life and the approach I take into work, and in a broader sense.
We're going to dive into this, and we're going to have a look at some of those parallels in a little while. But for, again, those who have not bumped into Sky Bioscience, tell us a little bit about the current areas of work and how that's evolving for you.
Yeah, it's very exciting. So I had the opportunity of seeing what evolved in the cancer immunotherapy space. I started my last company in 2010. Well, actually, it was formed in 2011, but kind of the business plan was being written in 2010. And when I began that company, there was only one kind of new drug launched in the current era of cancer immunotherapy. So over the last decade, really saw what has transpired in terms of anyone that is diagnosed with cancer. They have a lot more options. There's a lot of success in terms of these immunotherapies being highly personalized to have that response that patients are looking for. In the current company I'm working in, it's an earlier stage, but it's similarly tackling a very interesting opportunity where the endocannabinoid system, which is a network of receptors, is linked to a whole range of different diseases, from kind of neurological disorders to central nervous system disorders, and then there's also this link to the ophthalmology applications. So we've tried to kind of narrow in the field here and see if we can change the biology in the eye by utilizing this unique mechanism that's at play with these different receptors. And we're developing our initial drug for glaucoma, and what we've been able to demonstrate to date is that it's showing a really good activity biologically, and we're about to start our first clinical trial. So this now is about recapitulating the data that we've seen to date in animals, in humans, and we're quite excited about that. That I think for the entire industry in terms of the area that we're in, really lays the bedrock for a lot more opportunity in terms of utilizing this side of human biology.
It's such a fascinating subject. As you're talking it through, I can see that actually what you're doing is really groundbreaking. It's fundamentally shifting the outcomes that people can expect to receive, right?
Absolutely, and that's the fascinating thing about life sciences. I mean, there's one frustrating side of it, that it takes a long time to develop drugs, and there's quite a process. It's not like you come up with an application and all of a sudden it's utilized. Technology companies are notorious for being able to demonstrate kind of proof of concept to something you're holding in your hand relatively quickly. In life sciences, there's definitely a longer lead time. However, there's certain science that's underway today that is truly groundbreaking and necessary. Unfortunately, what's happening in ophthalmology applications, patients develop tolerance to some of the existing drugs. They become ineffective. So there is a need for having disease management or change to be available for these patients, or options to be available for these patients. So this is what I think we can accomplish with the technology that we're developing right now. And then on the business side of the equation, it's also exciting because big pharma, who will ultimately be where we will try to exit the last company I was involved with. We had an opportunity to partner with Merck. Similarly, big pharma has the need to have new intellectual property and new drugs.
So as a serial entrepreneur in such a really niche area of business, how do you just keep innovating? Where do these ideas come from?
So there's a huge amount of patience from the teams that we're working with. I think the ideas are always there. There's so much inspiration around us, right? That's what I love about in my particular case. I feel like I have this very good creative bug about me, but then it's also balancing that with the reality check. You have the important people around you that can make it pragmatic in terms of the way that things can be developed. So in life sciences, there's no shortage, I think, of similar types of creativity and opportunities that we can explore. It's just trying to be pragmatic about the resources in order to deploy it. So now what's interesting I've been in the industry now for 20 years. I actually started on the healthcare fund side. I worked at a venture capital fund and then moved into the operational side and been in operational roles for the last 20 years. But the great thing we're seeing today, I mean, compared to 10 years ago even, is the intersection of these different industries now. And I even touch on this in Catapult, where my last chapter is called like Mavericks, and it's really a call to action that there's very important themes that are still underway today, macro level. You can take that and apply that in any industry. I see intersections between AI and life science happening right in front of us in terms of opportunities we're looking at. We see opportunities of deep learning, being applied on being able to rapidly scale up drugs. You look at what happened with the COVID-19 vaccines, that they were able to sequence the virus and then come up with several solutions and rapidly move them through development. And you saw entire industries kind of come together in order to make it happen, from the manufacturing that's necessary to the science to the scale up to the distribution. Everyone was talking about taking 5 years before you can get a vaccine, and we saw it unfold in front of us within a year. That's quite impressive.
I would imagine that also gives you the permission as an organization to think that you can scale quicker than you maybe have done in the past. So having had that experience around you, it unlocks different thinking as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So, I benefited from coming from the corporate finance side, and it's a very regulated industry, life sciences. But understanding operations, understanding kind of the governance side, and then these international components, business building, licensing. There's so many moving parts. So I've really enjoyed, as much as there's a component of life sciences that sometimes sounds like it's like, oh, it's moves like molasses. You're actually running super fast, and it doesn't it may not always seem fast on the outside looking in, but inside it's been amazing to see that growth. And there's always an inflection required in early stage companies, early stage industries, and we're in that right now. I'm working in an area that is truly a kind of a novel area. There's not many companies in this space. There's a limited amount of data, but there's an impressive set of data as well. And there's been a few companies that have already proven how this is an effective development space. So I expect there to be, like any industry, like there's going to be literally a hockey stick style growth that happens eventually once you prove that efficacy.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. I will watch with absolute closeness.
Thank you.
You read the book Catapult, which really you talk around as that parallels earlier from your training and resilience as an athlete and the application at work. What was the moment that you thought, right, I've got something here that I could share with others. I'm going to write it down.
Well, it didn't happen until after I wrote like about 100,000 words.
It's often the case, right?
So because so I didn't originally plan to share this outside. This was a function of what happened, what we all went through in 2020, right? Where a lot, the pandemic, forced us to be indoors and slow down and take stock of kind of our lives, right? So there was definitely a component of me having that opportunity, and then the other side of it was I was also hitting a personal milestone. So I always wanted to kind of sit down and write down what I believe in terms of my own principles of what have I learned over the last 20 years, and what would I have told myself if I had the opportunity to tell myself 20 years earlier what would be the way to do it. I talk about this sometimes with my wife, and in the last 10 years, I've been living in San Diego. I've only appreciated the lifestyle that San Diego brings in the last 5 to 10 years. And maybe it's partially because the kids are older and so forth, but the other aspect of it, the reality has been that I didn't take advantage of that beautiful lifestyle that Southern California brings. In the early part of my career, I was very focused on working hard, working those long hours and putting in that time. And as you get to a certain stage in your life, you're able to kind of look past a lot of those type of things and be a bit more reflective of how to be not only efficient, but at the same time more purpose driven in terms of how these other aspects impact our lives. So Catapult was an opportunity to do that. I was, in one respect, I feel very blessed with the opportunities of working with several different people, having the chance of building these different companies and the technologies, and truly it's been rewarding because you're seeing that these drugs actually save people's lives. So I have to pinch myself in terms of the opportunities that we had. So that was an opportunity in a period where I was just really focused on saying, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to have that same definition of success in the next phase in my life. There's a certain trajectory that comes with your going into your 40s. I feel like, and then
Right.
a different trajectory afterwards. And it's nothing to do with age. I think it's just, there's an author, David Brooks. He kind of talks about it in two mountains. In terms of the first mountain of your life, it's basically a checklist, right? You have to finish your school, and you maybe do a higher degree, and then you're established in your career, and then you want to start a family and stabilize your life with the things that are necessary, the food, shelter type of equation, like the basic needs, Maslow's hierarchy.
Right.
And then once those things are in place, then you're really moving on to your second mountain, and your second mountain ends up being a lot more about self-fulfillment. And that's the thing I think that I was wrestling with as an individual. I believe I've had a lot of wonderful opportunity in this first segment of my life, but how do I define that same success going forward for myself? And whatever, quote unquote, what does that trajectory look like? It may not mean that it's like, the same. It's not the same definitions that were very prescriptive, I guess, in the first 20 years.
Yeah, I like it. And also, I guess, whilst it's not about age,
yeah,
it is definitely about experience, though, isn't it? So, some people get over that first mountain really quick.
Yeah.
Some take much longer to get over it. But I think all of us can recognize that at some point we go, okay, now where am I going? Where's this all heading?
Mm-hmm.
And in order for us to really tap into that, that's where that corporate athlete can really help us. So you talk about this corporate athlete with having some core foundations, some themes, behaviors that are associated with them. I wonder if you could just share those with us.
Yeah. So as a corporate athlete, it's really this aspect that strengthening resilience can help you attain the success that you want to achieve. So I believe there's so many similarities in behavior, in training, in approach, that both the athlete and, call it a corporate athlete, face to really realize their dream and then lead to whatever breakthrough, or sometimes it's an innovative breakthrough, sometimes it's just a personal breakthrough. And that's really the underlying premise of the book. And I feel I use this word blessed a lot, but I have to kind of state it, because I wouldn't redefine anything or redesign any component of what my experience has been. In growing up, I was raised in India. I grew up in East Vancouver in Canada, and then had an opportunity to move to the U.S. to work in a career, and had the opportunity to also work with companies that not only were incredibly successful, but they also had their own challenges along the way. Probably been at the brink of like insolvency, working in startups half a dozen times in my career, which is interesting in itself. So all of those things, all of those aspects, I think have a definition of resilience. So I believe that I'm kind of wired to like to go through the hard stuff in order to experience the positives and the benefits out of it. It's I don't know how often your wife's making you train with her for the Ironman, but when you go about training, like let's just take a bike session, you usually want to work that hill and do what's required to get up a steep mountain climb or whatever, and then the reward is usually coming down it fast, or just it's the fun part of the session. And I enjoy that climb because I like enjoying the satisfaction of the feeling on the other side of it.
That's interesting.
And a lot of people just don't take enough stock or notice of that important part of that climb.
Yeah.
In anything. So
by the way, she absolutely loves climbing hills, but I absolutely hate it, and we have different perspectives of it. So she gets this real rush of
and we all hate it.
She gets this rush of energy that gets her up there. I
Yeah.
do the opposite. I have the rush of energy of I've got to hold it in. I've got to hold it in and get to the top of the climb, and then boy, I really can fly down the hill the other side.
Yeah.
And therefore, mindset has got a massive part to play in this too, hasn't it?
100%. And
because people will come from it from different perspectives.
yeah, and that's the thing. So I whenever anybody gives me a challenge, I'm just like I'm in the happy place. Like that is something that is just I've lucked out in terms of being able to really take advantage of seeing these difficult situations and having a half glass half empty type of attitude about anything. So it's not always pretty, but I do really well in that situation. And partially what I do well in is visualizing what that outcome looks like on the other end.
Right.
So it's that translation of I already am picturing what the success looks like at the other end of that. And I try to kind of recapitulate that to the best of my ability on the completion. So yeah, this book was about encapsulating a lot of that. And I believe as an athletes, they go through a lot of that. They go through visualization techniques. They go through a lot of rigorous training. They go through a lot of pain in order to reap the rewards and have the discipline then to compete at the world stage. So I haven't had the same level of success being able to compete at the world stage, but I've also benefited from training at a pretty elite level throughout my career. So I've tried to apply those things into day to day in terms of even working with my team.
So if you think of the component parts of being a corporate athlete, you've got things like mental aptitude, holding yourself accountable to the things you commit to, making sure that you've got a real strong regime of training that is not just regular training, but it's endurance, which means it gets stronger and deeper. And then, of course, you have this focus drive element that you call out in your book. Of those kind of four themes, is there one that's more important than the other, or do you think they're all interrelated?
I believe they're all interrelated, and each one of them stands, capable of being on its own. We just have to recognize that they are a big part of it. I mean, I've looked at this trapezium situation many ways, and I purposely designed it in a way that it has an openness to it. So there's not a pyramid, there's no closure to it. So a big part of it is the fact that you, by defining your purpose or defining your kind of understanding of what's that engine that's inside of you and what's leading you, that is a big part of the source of motivation and the source of determination. So if we were to prioritize, that is a very important part of it. The other components like accountability, the physical capacity, the emotional intelligence, and the mental capacity, those are all helping really support that and really achieve that impact that you're looking for. I think one thing, if I was, now that this book has had a bit of time to breathe, I've been even kind of reflecting on it further, is my message coming across too harsh in terms of does everyone have to make some sort of significant impact or dent on the planet? I don't think that has to be the case. It has to be kind of your own personal definition of what that dent is. So sometimes people get lost in trying to make a connection with whatever their purpose has to be something that's too lofty or not communicating enough to themselves in terms of what is maybe right in front of them. I really am challenging people to go and spend the time to understand your purpose and define what that means for yourself, and don't try to compare yourself to Oprah Winfrey's purpose or whoever else. There's everyone has a different definition of that. And in order to help you achieve that second mountain, that it's the underlying, these underlying components.
I wonder how many people who don't end up feeling like they've had this impact on life get stuck because they perceive the journey to be too big. The second mountain is too big, rather than actually looking at themselves internally versus looking at external events happening around them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I think it's a really important question you asked about what of these things are most important, because everyone has to take a very holistic approach, and that's why this joy component that's emphasized in this book is a very another important lens to that equation. So it's this proverbial balance in life doesn't exist for anyone. You have most often we're working towards our professional goals, and we're working towards our personal goals, and we're working towards our individual goals. So finding joy in work, in yourself, and in life is part of the necessary thing that helps you continue to have that nuclear engine inside of you as well, that keeps spinning, so that you have that source of motivation. Joy is 100% linked, I believe, to giving somebody that intrinsic motivation to actually do what they ultimately want to do.
I like that. There's so many people you bump into who hate getting up in the morning, going to work.
Yeah.
They go around in these routines, they get stuck almost. And it's because they can't find joy. Because joy emotionally unlocks everything else, right?
Yeah, and I hate like when people get stuck trying to define what other people's routines and their own other people's definitions are for themselves. Like, this is why, like, I guess this the health industry does this really well, where they, everyone's always hawking the next plan and whatever, the next diet regime or or workout regime or whatever it is. So people try to implement their model onto someone else. And I tried to avoid this in this book. Is like I was trying to be very clear that these are my principles that I believe that help. And what it is it's giving you a framework, but please spend the time to identify your own set of principles that work for you, and that this takes time and effort. People, how often are people sitting down and writing down what their principles are? So but the point that you raise is really important, like that we don't have to follow anyone else's routine. If it brings you joy to wake up at 9:00 and start your day with a croissant rather than starting your day with a 30-minute run, then I don't see anything wrong with that. It's just like, it's really, you got to really navigate for yourself what it means to get to wherever you're going in terms of your motivation. Of course, underlying that, there are still things like you have to take good care of your health, and you have to take good care of your mental health, and be continuing to be accountable to yourself to be a high performer. But the definition of high performance is different for everyone, and it doesn't need to be like what first images that come to mind when we say the words high performing. I think that's what's unfortunately gets very frustrating for people, and then people lose that joy and that energy that is pretty intrinsic in everyone.
Yes, 100%. And for anybody listening to this now who are thinking, I can never run an Ironman, or I could never perform in an Ironman, or run a marathon, or take up a new sport, that is absolutely just a mindset. Now, respectfully, there are also some physical things that might be going on around them, but it doesn't have to equally be an Ironman. It could just be a personal best in something. It could be starting something new. It could be leading a different team, getting different results. So it's absolutely about personalizing some of those principles and behaviors, isn't it?
Absolutely, 100%. So this is why I think that philosophy of that mindset is where we all need to continue to focus on. I'm very happy that like my 9-year-old, you can talk to her any day, and she'll always quote somewhere along the line about having a growth mindset. And I don't know where she picked it up. Obviously, she's got some strong influences around her, but it reminds me to always also have that growth mindset, because
Does, yeah.
it's like it's just yeah. So it's you're right. Like we sometimes get caught up with all of the other noise in our lives, and we forget the simple things like that. And it's sometimes just starting something different. Maybe try your routine different, or work with your team differently.
So our folks listening to this will be familiar that this is where we start to hack into your leadership brain. Start to get all of those experiences and shortlist them into your top 3 leadership hacks. What would they be?
My top 3 leadership hacks. Okay, well, I definitely use lists. I talk about that. So that is a big part of my daily routine is a checklist. So I'm a big list person. I use a top 3. I use a longer list of 10 things, but every day there's 3 things that have to get done, and it's regarded as the top 3. Otherwise, I do use lists often. Number 2 has been really about being myself. I find that that's a constant reminder in terms of everyone that you're around, is just to be yourself, and that's a big part of the first part of this book is called True Accountability, and I've kind of tried to define a formula around that. And the third has been try to enjoy Friday nights. Like that's been a big part of I don't like, as long as I can think. I try to have a lime margarita or something like that, or just remind myself that there's a lot to be thankful for. You have to find joy and sometimes really make room for it. In the book, I talk about different routines so people can kind of dive into that. But sometimes it's a Sunday on Sunday nights, and other times it's a margarita on Friday nights.
Yeah, and it's a reward too.
Oh, yeah,
right. For all of the disciplines and that you apply in your life and work, we all still need that reward, don't we?
Yeah. And by the way, there's the obvious ones that I have to wake up in the morning and start my day with working out. So I guess one of the biggest leadership hacks that I can emphasize is that I really take pride in owning the morning. So if you get the morning right, it really helps you set yourself up for success the rest of the day. So by really taking the time to own that morning and organize yourself, and that means starting the time that allows you to do that, it really helps you be successful throughout the day without being feeling flustered the rest of the time.
Great advice. Next part of the show, we call it Hack to Attack. So this is typically where something hasn't worked out well, but as a result, we've learned from it, and it's now a force of good in what we do. So what would be your hack to attack?
Lack of planning. There's definitely been a couple of situations in my career where not having a plan has basically been a plan to fail. When we're developing different drugs, there's quite an extensive process involved, and most often clinical trials is kind of your measurement point along the way. So there's different stage gate decisions that lead to a clinical trial. But once a clinical trial is underway, I think many people get kind of caught up, or different companies get caught up with just getting to that inflection point and not properly planning for the success of ensuring that the trial can go smoothly. Sometimes that's linked to enrollment, and sometimes it's linked to the appropriate resources. And I've been through a situation where both of those were not properly not properly sought after in terms of the resources and the bandwidth that was required in order for us to really succeed in the time that was given. So what it ended up leading to was over budget, not being able to complete the trial in the amount of time that we've had allocated, and we didn't get to our end goal in time. A very basic example, but it's a very important one in our industry, because I think sometimes entrepreneurs or just teams can get caught up with just feeling like, okay, we just got to get there, and once we start that, it'll happen. But it's not anything like that. You're always having to think way past that. And then I talk about this about thinking past the finish line.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very important takeaway for this, is that in anything that you're doing, you're sometimes your mind is only set on achieving that goal that you had set, and it could be lofty or important or whatever it is, but it's most often getting to that is usually not the problem. It's actually following through and finishing whatever is required after that. And so thinking past the finish line is a critical one. And in my case, in that clinical trial, we ended up getting to the end result, but it wasn't pretty in terms of getting there. We almost ran out of money as a company. It took too long. The number of patients that we had to enroll in the study had to get larger, and then we had to go to more sites around the world. And a lot of those things could have been avoided earlier on.
It's an old cliche, but the whole fail to plan to fail philosophy, isn't it? Exactly right. Yeah. So last part of the show, we get to give you a chance to do some time travel, bump back into yourself at 21 and give yourself some advice. What would it be?
I think my advice to myself would have been to take more time to soak it in terms of the different experiences. Oftentimes we work with some really wonderful people and we fail to kind of recognize that in the moment. And I think each one of the interactions that we have in our careers is super critical in terms of building those experiences. So just enjoying those moments and treating every single interaction. Sometimes it's with your boss, sometimes it's with your team, as great opportunities for learning. That would be my big takeaway. And part of that, I wish I spent a bit more time writing about those experiences. Sometimes like you're so in the midst of doing these transactions, like I've pulled all-nighters and done these complex deals, raising capital for companies and licensing deals, and we're talking like mega million deals. And I wish that I had taken the time to kind of journal around some of those experiences, because
another couple of books written.
Well, it's not about that, but just in terms of appreciating like what you get out of those things.
Exactly.
Like sometimes you're dealing with all of these complex, legal terms and all of these things that are great learning experiences, but it's all in our head now. Like I can recall it vividly in terms of the pain points that we've experienced in those things. But I just wish that I'd taken more time to really appreciate those moments, because they went very rapidly.
And that is thinking past the finish line, right?
Yeah.
Great.
What I've learned from my bosses is a responsibility that I expect like my team to be able to share with their teams and so forth. So I think it's a cycle that continues to evolve, but it's an important one because that's how innovation happens.
It certainly does. So for folks listening to this who'd like to get a copy of Catapult, would love to learn more about you, the work that Sky Bioscience are doing, where's the best place for us to send them?
Yeah, you can send them to my website, and it's punitdhillon.com. And there are several tabs on the website that can lead you to the book, as well as contacting me if you have any questions. I would be happy to respond.
Brilliant. And we'll make sure they're in the show notes as well.
Thank you so much, Steve.
So thanks for ever so much for being on the show, Punit, and thank you for sharing some stories. And we very much look forward to having you a part of our network.
Thank you so much, Steve.
I genuinely want to say a heartfelt thanks for taking time out of your day to listen in too. We do this in the service of helping others and spreading the word of leadership. Without you listening in, there would be no show. So please subscribe now if you haven't done so already. Share this podcast with your communities and network and help us develop a community and a tribe of leadership hackers. And finally, if you'd like me to work with your senior team, your leadership community, keynote an event, or you would like to sponsor an episode, please connect with us via our social media. And you can do that by following and liking our pages on Twitter and Facebook. Our handle there is @LeadershipHacker. Instagram, you can find us there @the_leadership_hacker, and at YouTube, we're just Leadership Hacker. So that's me signing off. I'm Steve Rush, and I've been the Leadership Hacker.